You have a piece of canvas art and you're just not really sure what to do with it. Do I hang it on my wall with no frame? Do I frame it? What the hell kind of frame do you put around a piece of canvas art? Well, I'll tell you, it's usually a floating frame. Floating frame is just that, it's a frame. The artwork actually gets screwed into it from the back and it looks like it's floating inside of the frame. I've made some of these before on a smaller scale. However, last summer we bought a really cool piece that we love from, well, it's on the outside of Park City, Utah. The artist is Kranstover. He's a well-known artist in the area. He was actually commissioned to do a big giant 35-foot tall torch during the 2002 Winter Olympics. So I'll link all of his stuff and put it in the description. I highly recommend you check him out. His artwork is really, really cool. And if you're ever around Park City, Utah, I really recommend going and checking out his studio. It's really cool, and he's the nicest guy too whenever you meet him and he's there. But anyways, we had this piece of artwork. I needed to frame it, so I'm going to show you how I framed mine. Maybe it'll help you frame whatever artwork you have. Now, for my frame, I decided to use some black walnut that I had laying around, just because our furniture, a lot of our stuff is dark wood, so it'd match perfectly in our house. However, this walnut was not in any way milled. I had to, it was really rough cut, so I had to mill it down. I did this by using a sled and some other stuff because I don't have a joiner. All I have is a planer, and by using a sled, you're able to get one flat surface, flip it over, and then run it through your planer, get that. And then I put it on my sled and used it as a, I guess, an edge joiner. Anyways, you can do all that with this sled. I did a video that showed how to make the sled. I'll link it for you, so feel free and check it out, and it'll show you how I made that sled, so you can do the same process. First step is I had to get the measurements of the actual art. I needed the depth and of course the width and height. 30 1/8 by 24. The hard part is done, I think. This board had quite a bit of milling to do, and for me to mill a board, it's not the easiest. As you can see, I had to use my big ginormous jig. It's just a pain, but I've got one nice edge on this to run along my fence. Both sides are flat, and right now the board sets at about 7/8 inch thick. I think for the frame, what I'm gonna do is this is gonna be the edge going around the thickness of 7/8 with a gap going around the frame. It's gonna be a floating frame. And I think I'm gonna cut the strips about 5/8 inch wide. Did I say 5/8? Way off. It's 1 inch and 5/8, but I think I went back in there and remeasured. I think I'm gonna do it 1.5 inches. So that's how wide I'm gonna cut the strips from the walnut. I won't show y'all too much of me cutting. You've seen me cutting in 1,000 other videos. I'll be cutting on the table saw on my nice jointed edge. I will have to run some reverse rabbets. What I mean by reverse rabbets is usually the rabbets are on the other side, so your art sets in the rabbets. However, the rabbets on this one are gonna be in the back, and I'm gonna use 1/4 inch plywood to put back there, and that's what the frame is gonna mount to, and then give it that floating effect in the frame. That's the idea. See how it goes. And like I said, I won't bore y'all too much with the cutting, but I took my jointed edge, put it up against the fence, and I ran it through, and I made my 1 inch and 5/8 strips. This is gonna be the depth, so the artwork will set in it, and it should be about even with it when it's done. After that, I cut these down to size with miter joints, 45 degrees to make 90 degrees, and to make the frame. I went ahead and did a test fit up to make sure the artwork was gonna set in there right, and lo and behold, yeah. Well, I screwed up. Do it all the time. I guess we all do. This is why it's important to measure twice, cut once. For me, it always seems like I'm measuring multiple times and still cutting multiple times. But regardless, I screwed up. So it was supposed to be, the actual dimensions was 30 and 1/8. So I was gonna add 1 inch, 31 and 1/8, and that would give me 1/2 inch on each side. I did the same thing for the vertical pieces as well, and those turned out fine. I got 1/2 inch perfectly on each side, top and bottom. But on the sides, it's a little narrow. It's like perfect fit. So I gotta cut more. Damn it. So I went back to the drawing board, and luckily I had more walnut, and I cut me a few more pieces of the horizontal top and bottoms, and I made them a little bit longer to give me that 1/2 inch. I guess I got about 5/8. So I'm gonna take a little bit more off the bottom and top piece to bring it in a little bit. I'm gonna have to take off about a 1/16. I wonder if you can even see that. So I marked my line, do this one first, the next one, and I'm just gonna kind of work my way there till it's good. In situations like this, I'll find that sometimes it's easier just to slowly creep up to your mark. I'll cut a little bit, I'll go over, and then I'll test it, see if it's right yet, and then I'll come back, cut more if I need to, and I just creep up on it, and sometimes that works out really well. All right, let's see if this fits any better. If I was gonna make a whole bunch of these, of course I would make a jig or, you know, something like that, but I'm only doing one. If you don't have one of these ratchet straps in your repertoire, I highly recommend getting one. I always link it in the description, but they're great for picture frames, boxes, anything else where you're putting together miter joints. And also the little shims that I use, those are very handy too. In this case, I'm using 2 1/4 inch shims on each side, which gives me my 1/2 inch, and that allows me to get a perfect spacing all the way around. Once I knew everything was good as far as the spacing, I took my pieces and I put a chamfer on the outside edge. I did this using my table saw set at a 45-degree angle. Next step, I had to put some rabbets on the back side, and this was going to be for my 1/4 inch plywood. That was going to be all the way around the back side of it, and that's what you mount the artwork to. So right here, I'm just marking how deep my rabbet needs to go. And using my table saw, I cut my rabbets. If y'all want to see how I do this on the table saw, I'll link the video I did on it. It's real easy, and you don't need a router or anything. It's for easy rabbets. And perfect rabbets for the plywood backing. I'm just gonna use some Titebond too and glue it up as is. I'll use the strap clamp it all together, let it set overnight. Easy. The splines are gonna be the true strength of this, and you'll see when I put that in if you've never seen splines before. But anytime you have a miter joint, you're going to want to reinforce it one way or another. My favorite way is with splines. Trixie. She's deaf. What are you doing? What are you doing, girl? After letting it set and dry all night, it's time to cut the splines. Sometime back I made this spline jig. Basically it's just 2 45-degree angles, and you can set whatever miter corner you want to put in there and run it through the table saw blade at the depth that you like. The hardest part, honestly, is making the actual splines and getting them perfect where they fit the width of your saw blade. I'm going to do a video on that eventually because I'm finding better and better ways to do this, but I haven't done the video yet. And when I do make splines, I make a bunch of them and I keep them in a bag so I have them at a later date, so I don't have to make them every time for a project. All you're going to do is put some glue on those splines, put them down in your cutout right there, and that's it. If you have a good fit up, you don't even have to wait for it to dry. You can go ahead and flush cut them right from there. If not, then you're going to go ahead and just let those dry either overnight or give it a couple hours. And this is not the order that I went in on this project. I actually cut my splines a lot later. As you can see here, I continued on with the splines in, letting the glue dry. And that was only because I knew I was going to sand later. I still had a lot more to do, so I just waited on this one. What I did start doing is I started measuring out what I was going to need for my 1/4 inch backing, and that's what was going to set in those rabbets. This is what the artwork was going to get screwed to eventually. And I want to say I cut out like 2-inch, 1.5, 2-inch strips. This was going to be totally just for the backing that the art was going to mount to. And once I got my backing strips cut, I put some Titebond 2 glue down in the rabbet, and I went ahead and put my strips in. I temporarily fastened them with my brad nailer, and then I did end up adding some actual screws to make sure that it was really secure. Now, to give this that illusion of the void around the edge, I needed to tape this off, and that way I could spray paint it. I'm not worried about any little edges shown because I'm going to sand this later, so it doesn't matter. And for the paint, I'm just using a matte black out of a rattle can, nothing crazy. And for my sanding sequence on this project, I started at 80 grit, went to 120, and ended at 220. And that was more than enough. Now from here, it was time to pre-drill my holes. These are going to be the holes used to run screws from the back into the actual artwork frame itself. I'm going to finish my frame with boiled linseed oil. It's real easy to apply. I just use a rag. One thing though about this is this can burn down your shop or garage. Make sure that whenever you're done with your rag, you lay it out, let it totally cure for a day or so. Or if you have a steel fire bucket, rag bucket that closes, that's made for oily rags, you can throw it in there. But if you leave this wadded up, throw it in the trash can, it'll generate enough heat, catch on fire, trash can will go up. I did a video on it. You can check it out if you want. To mount it, I'm going to lay it in there, and I'm going to use my shims to get it nice and even. I talk about these shims all the time in my other videos. These things are awesome. Come in 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 16th inch, and 32nd inch. Yeah, I think I've talked about the shims enough. Anyways, they are very useful in this situation because it's really easy to get it perfectly even on all 4 sides. So I use it in this application pretty often. And from here, once I got them all in there nice and tight, I was able to lift the artwork up and then screw it in from the back using my pre-drilled holes on the backing. And after that, that's really it. You can go in there and hang up your artwork. I'm really happy with how the entire project turned out. This was the biggest floating frame I've made to date, so it turned out great. I will tell y'all, I got some interesting videos coming up down the line. I'm working on them now, so stay tuned if you want to see those. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you next time.